Hi, if you're just joining us, my name is Mary Bales and I work for the Nueces River Authority. Now we're going to do our presentation here at our model. So this is a hard plastic model. Do you think we're going to be talking about groundwater or runoff water? If you said runoff water, you're correct, because there's no way that that water can infiltrate through this hard plastic surface. This is a topographic model of the Nueces River Basin. Okay, and if you're not used to, or if you don't know what that word topographic means, it means that it shows the elevation of the land. It's different than just a flat model or map. It shows the higher elevation and the lower elevation. Okay, so it starts up here in the hill country, and it goes all the way until it reaches the Gulf of Mexico. This black line is the divide. Okay, it's separating us from those other river basins that we talked about earlier, the other 22. Okay, so over here is the San Antonio River Basin, and on this side is the Rio Grande River Basin. This is the Rio Grande River, and this would be Mexico over here on this side. So it's only the Nueces River Basin that we did topographically, and that means it shows the elevation. Okay, if you were here, you would be able to feel the higher areas and the lower areas. Over here is our legend, our key, and it shows the state of Texas. This part in green is the only part that we're looking at. So we're not looking at the entire state. We're just looking at this part right here in green. The legend also tells us that these thin blue lines are the rivers and creeks. The thin red lines are the major roads and highways, and these thin gray lines are the county borders or boundaries. So here's the hill country. Over here is the Gulf of Mexico, and this dark green area right here is an estuary. An estuary is where the salt water comes in on the waves, the fresh water runs off from the land, and it mixes together, forms kind of a brackish water, kind of half salty and half fresh. There's a lot of wildlife that like to live in this wet, marshy environment down here. A lot of baby birds and baby fish are hatched there every year. So it's a very important part of our environment here. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow the river, the Nueces River. The Nueces River is the longest one in the basin, so they named the basin after it, after the Nueces River. So up here in the hill country, all of these rivers heads or starts up here by that spring water that I mentioned in the PowerPoint, where that water is being forced back up to the surface through the cracks and crevices in the rocks and the soil. So that's what starts all of these rivers. So here is the Nueces River. And you can see, if you are following, that how it kind of meanders. And that word meander means it just kind of curves back and forth. It's following that lowest spot in the land, okay? And it's what the water has been eroding away over millions of years. All of these other little rivers and creeks flow into the Nueces River, kind of curves around this way, curves back around. It goes through Lake Corpus Christi into Nueces Bay, Corpus Christi Bay, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Another major river is the Frio River. I don't know if any of you like to go up to Concan, Leakey, Garner State Park and go tubing in the Frio River. That's what this is right here, the Frio River. It's started by that spring water, and it meanders around this way. All of these other rivers in this area flow into the Frio River. That goes through Choke Canyon. And then the other major river is the Atascosa, and that starts here in Atascosa County. And right here on the other side of Choke Canyon, those three rivers come together, the Nueces, the Atascosa, and the Frio. And they meet right there at a town that's called Three Rivers, Texas. They named the town that because that's what's happening in that area. Then flows into Lake Corpus Christi, and then on the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. Now, something that's very important about Lake Corpus Christi, we talked in the PowerPoint about people getting their drinking water, their usable water, from the groundwater. Well, the people that live here along the coast do not, okay, because of all the salt water that's mixing with that water there under the ground. They actually get most of their drinking water from Lake Corpus Christi. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do at this time is we're going to see what happens with the impact or effect that we have on our river basins, okay, and our rivers and the land. So we're going to pretend that we are putting pollution. And we're going to, remember we talked about models having limitations. We didn't want to bring real pollution with us, so we're going to be using food coloring to represent pollution. It's not pollution, we're just going to pretend that it is. Pollution, as we talked about earlier, is anything that's not native or natural to the land. So the grasses and the sticks and the twigs and the rocks, those things belong there. But anything that we put there is pollution. And as I'm talking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting some drops around up here close to the hill country, and we're going to see what happens to it. But remember, pollution can be plastic bottles, it could be aluminum cans, French fry wrappers, it could be plastic bag from a grocery store, oil, diesel, gasoline. I'm going to use some different colors. It could be your homework assignment, you know, the one that the dog didn't eat, that one. So I want you, while I'm doing this, just think about things that you've seen, maybe in parking lots along the side of the road. The worst thing that I've ever seen in a parking lot is a dirty diaper. That's pretty gross. Where does that go? Do you remember where it goes when we talked about when it goes down to that storm drain when it rains? All right, I think we probably have sufficient amount of pollution. So now what we're going to do is we are going to pretend that it's raining. But before we do that, remember I mentioned those riparian plants and how helpful they are to help prevent some of that pollution from traveling. So I'm going to pretend that this piece of green felt are some of those plants. I'm going to put it right here along the Nueces River, and we're going to see if it actually does help prevent or at least slow down some of that pollution. I'm going to use this spray bottle as our rain cloud. And I'm going to ask for Miss Worley if she would help us here. And we're just going to have a nice little gentle rain up here in the hill country. And you can see what's happening. That Cheeto bag, that chip bag that you put on the ground at your school campus, the rain is taking it with it. It's taking all that pollution from the parking lots, the side of the road, and it's carrying it down into the rivers and creeks. You can see, if you'll go ahead and continue to spray, you can see how it's hitting the watershed. Remember, the watershed is just the land, and it's running off the land into the lower elevation of the rivers and creeks. So you can see the Frio River is carrying all that pollution down, but this has slowed down. Our pretend plants have slowed down some of that pollution. I'm going to pretend we have a little flooding up here in the hill country just to expedite things a little bit. Okay. So you can see how gravity is pulling that water down to the lower elevation. Okay, that's what we call sea level, where the land and the ocean comes together, 0 feet. So we started at 2,400 feet up here in the hill country, and that water continued to flow until it reached 0 feet or sea level. Look at all that pollution that's in the estuaries, where those baby birds and baby fish live. Would you like to be a fish swimming in that polluted water, growing up in that polluted water? Would you like to eat the fish or the shrimp that grew up in that polluted water? Remember the food chain? Okay, if those fish or shrimp are eating that pollution and you eat them, then you also have that in your body. That's the habitat for those animals that live down there. That's their home. What we have done is we've taken our trash, our garbage, and we've put it in their home. And there's not anything they can do about that. Would you like it if somebody came to your house and knocked on your door, opened the door and threw their trash into your living room? You would probably have a fit, wouldn't you? So that's what's happening to the animals that live down there. We are taking our trash, our pollution, and it's ending up in their habitat and their home. Let's see if our riparian plants prevented some of that from traveling. We see that it slowed it down, but let's see if it actually did prevent it. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to squeeze it out. And you can see how much pollution it did indeed stop. So remember, any time that you are putting anything on the ground that does not belong there, it's pollution and it's not going to stay there. when it rains, that rain is going to take everything with it down to the lowest spot, and it's going to end up in all of the rivers where we like to go swimming, and it's going to end up in our estuaries, in our bays, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. And remember, the Gulf of Mexico is tied to the Atlantic Ocean, so that water can spread and that pollution can spread all over the world. Okay, well, thank you. I hope you've learned a lot, and if you have any questions, feel free. I know your teacher will be glad to answer them for you, or we can also have some communication if you would like more information. Thank you.